a conference room in an office building somewhere in downtown Westport. I was seated at the table with members of the Saugatuck Church Pastoral Search Committee, who invited me down from Simsbury, Connecticut for a second interview, just weeks after a devastating fire tore through this church in November of 2011. I didn't really know what to expect. We hadn't spoken to each other since months before the fire, so I just did a lot of listening. One by one, members of your search committee described the loss and how they were managing in its wake. I must have answered some questions, too. I no longer recall all the details. What I do remember is this. As our interview drew to a close, longtime member Russ Brenneman led us in prayer. May this loss open our hearts to the suffering of others, he prayed. And I was struck by this profound capacity to move so quickly from grief to compassion. Embedded in that prayer was an open-hearted question. What next, God? What can we learn here? Where will this take us? A seed was planted that day in the soil of our shared lives. A seed that led me and my family here to Westport to serve as Saugatuck's pastor. Jesus was always sowing seeds, like a patient farmer pressing one tiny pip after another into the soil of his followers' lives, and then watching, watering, waiting to see what might take root. Like the best kind of teacher, he resisted the urge to provide all the answers. Instead, he told stories. Stories designed to plant an idea, or an image, or an invitation in the heart and the mind of the listener. Have you ever considered what would happen if, imagine if you were like soil? Some of you may remember reading the book Jesus is the Question, written by the Reverend Martin Copenhaver. We read it together a couple of years back, and the book reminded us that in the gospel accounts, Jesus asks 307 questions and only answers 3 of them. Maybe 8, depending how you count. What kind of teacher is that? A teacher, it seems, who wants to help us to discover our own best thinking. A teacher who believes we have the wisdom and insight and capacity to make life-giving choices. Maybe even a teacher who delights in students who are willing to use their imaginations. And so Jesus scatters images all around to see where we'll take them. What if God's kingdom, God's beloved community, is like a weed gone wild in your backyard? What if we are like soil? What if God can surprise us with new life as easily as the sprout that pops up unbidden in the middle of the night? This is what I love about the parables. They're designed to stimulate our imagination, to make connections between ordinary things, a mustard seed, a conference table, and the wonderful, mysterious, life-altering movement of the Holy One in our midst. The question is, what seeds are being planted in our lives, in our midst, right now? What small encounters, what happy accidents may be inviting us, Saugatuck Church, to shift our thinking or try something new. Here's what I've noticed in recent weeks. A couple different patterns that have begun to emerge. First, I've noticed how often members of this church pray for the earth and its creatures. I've watched our young people take over dish duty during fellowship hour to stop us from using disposable plates and cups. I've sat with individual members as you've talked about feeling moved to action on behalf of our planet, whether by planting a pollinator garden or by attending an Earth Day rally. I've noticed all the energy that was sparked by the All Ages retreat, during which participants considered the ways that we as individuals and as a church could contribute to efforts to counter global warming and defend the well-being of God's creation. And so I have wondered whether God might be planting seeds of an environmental justice ministry or ministries in our midst. And second, recently I've been hearing from several members of the church who have been laid off from work, and others who find yourselves at a vocational crossroads. Still others are wondering what you will do when you become an empty nester or when you retire. We are a community of people in transition. Maybe that's always true, but this week I've been wondering whether there might be an invitation embedded in these sometimes difficult moments, seeds being planted for us to tend. Whether we as a church might just be a community that can lend support to those in transition. What if we took a page from the Jesus book, or 2 or 3, and became a place where people can imagine their next steps and do their best thinking? What if we could figure out how to accompany each other through these transitions in some concrete ways, providing space for reflection and support and resources for considering our purpose and direction? What if we were the church who knew how to ask questions that tap into our God-given wisdom and our capacity to make life-giving choices? What do you think about these ideas? I'm actually asking, and I'd love to hear back from those of you who might feel called or inspired to participate in one or the other. I also want to know what other seeds you have noticed. What do you think God is planting in our midst? I have no doubt that the Holy One continues to cultivate the soil of our shared lives. To unearth just what God is up to, we might begin by telling each other our stories. We might begin by comparing notes. And then, friends, let's try out some of these ideas. Happily, 4 of us just attended a workshop on how to design a pilot project. Our vice moderator, Kim Mathias, and Colette Van Breves, and Linda Yingling, and I joined members from several other churches last Wednesday, a week ago, for a few hours of being equipped with the tools to help us experiment with ideas that may be taking root in our midst. How do we move from idea to practice? So friends, we have help, tools and vision, and hearts ready to try something new. Of course, it may not always work out. Indeed, we may experience a colossal failure along the way, should fail if we try often enough, and that's all good, because it's in the failing that we learn. And not everything we try will fail. Indeed, many things might surprise us with the ways they erupt into life. Story tent, morphing from a once-a-year event to something that becomes a regular part of our worship life. It's one example of an experiment that we've tried out this year. I'm sure you can think of others that are already blessing us. Beloved in Christ, I learned a long time ago that this congregation has a remarkable capacity for compassion and imagination, a practiced ability to ask, what next, God? What can we learn here? Where will this take us? I've also learned that when we say yes to the invitation, when we agree to help to cultivate the seeds that have been planted, we will be surprised and blessed again and again by the new life that springs forth. It's what I've witnessed here at Saugatuck Church and continue to witness day in and day out. And so, beloved, today, let us take up the teacher's invitation. Let us be a little brave, a little playful, and see what blossoms. Let it be so. Amen.